For those of us who have been
So,
listening to it for 24 hours straight,
so
this is
good
wonderful.
evening, everyone, and it's Monday night. It is the beginning of Simchas Torah, celebration of Torah, and it's
Perfect.
also a celebration of what we hope will be the beginning of a peace process in Gaza. And so we'll begin with a blessing that we say at happy moments. And I noticed when one of the hostage families tonight was being reunited, the mother of this young man recited the Shehachianu. So we will
Yeah,
begin with
yeah.
that. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehachianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh, which
Right.
means, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of everything, Shehachianu, who has caused our life, B'kiyamanu, and has sustained us, V'higianu, and has brought us to this moment.
Oh,
And a very appropriate
Baruch
prayer.
Hashem.
Right. It's yes,
I
so it's
I
entirely
was up
appropriate
all
for
night
this.
watching this, and I told Alan I was going to bed early, but then I got caught up in the moment and I couldn't turn off the TV.
But
Yeah.
you were right. The 13 came later, and I stayed up, but you actually made, if you follow through, you made a smart decision.
Yeah. So it's very moving.
Yes.
And I certainly have my own thoughts about this, but I'm just curious as to uh what you
So,
think.
Rabbi,
Yes.
to start the discussion, I heard on in the commentaries, not on American TV, on Israeli TV, that in the book of Nehemiah, I think in
Right.
number 8, the Jews on this day, on Tishrei, go are went back to Israel to rebuild the temple, and it said the returning the hostages happened exactly on Semkas Torah when you're supposed to read on the open square the Torah, and so it is very, according to this rabbi, it's very meaningful.
And certainly the books of Ezra and Nehemiah
Yeah,
speak of the return of the
exile.
Israelites
Yeah,
to the Holy Land.
yeah,
So just to refresh our historical memory, this now is following the destruction of the temple in 586 BCE, the destruction by the Babylonians. Very quickly after this happened, Cyrus of Persia conquered Babylon, and Cyrus allowed the Israelites to return to Israel. And it is interesting that the people that were captured and taken to Babylon were primarily the leadership. I mean, it wasn't that the entire population
the
was taken.
Levites, the
No,
Levites.
I don't think it's just the Levites, but it's the leadership of the Israelites. And so he allowed them to return. And of course, many of the Israelites decided to stay in Babylon, which is why we have the Babylonian Talmud, and we're so influenced. When you read the Talmud, they talk about the schools in Babylon and the schools in Israel. So I don't know that I just plain don't remember whether the biblical text said that they returned in Tishrei, or they or that's a midrash, but certainly the that book talks about this idea of publicly reading the Torah in
Yeah,
front of the community. And so I know that scholars trace the current text of the Torah back to that time. So scholars would say that the text that we have of the Torah existed certainly around, so this would be around 450, 500 BCE. It's the oldest part of the Bible. Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, reminds me that one of the rabbis near here, Nico Solowski at Congregation in Shiradash, you came to when the previous rabbi was here many years ago, Rabbi. What he did to symbolize that public reading is we did a 1 mile approximately walk through the community carrying a Torah on the afternoon of Simchas Torah. And we passed it around, took turns calling it, but his gesture was to share it with the community, but not reading it at the time until we
Right,
got
right.
inside, but actually to e expose it to the community, and that was a practice I'd never seen or heard before.
Yeah, and
But
of course there's this practice of dancing with the Torah scrolls, and apparently that was a practice that the Soviets tolerated, even as they repressed Soviet Jewry on Simchas Torah or Simchat Torah, depending on whether you pronounce uh, the taf without a dagesh as a T or an S. The Soviets tolerated celebration of Simchat Torah. So I'm curious about your reaction to what we know of the peace plan. And it's interesting to me that there was this signing in Egypt, but as far as I know, no one has released a text of what they signed. So I'm curious, are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Um, I'm just curious what you think. I will tell you what I think, but I don't want to. That's something I do
I
probably.
I I I am how should I say? I am pessimistic because the plan actually doesn't mention it mentions that the Hamas supposed to give up his arm,
Right.
but in wording it doesn't mention surrender.
Right.
And as of today, I have friends in Israel, and they called me early in the morning. They live in Beth Shemesh, and they heard already that Hamas is killing people already in Gaza, who's supposed to be collaborating with Israel.
So
This is
Israel
number
still.
one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Number two, I remember uh, after World War II, Germany, Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia is not that much, but after World War II, the people in those cities which were completely leveled to the ground, and very few men, young men, lived in the cities. The women and the children, on their hands and knees, cleaned the rubbles to rebuild the city. And did not see any Gazans who were cleaning cities, and I am very apprehensive about the people who were at Sharm el Sheikh today and said that they're gonna donate or give millions of dollars to them to rebuild Gaza. And I think it's gonna go to the same place as before. Hamas gonna get the money, and they're gonna rearm within 5 years' time.
It's the pessimistic view, Alan.
So if I to comment, I comment that I was pleased that this could happen because a series of things came together that couldn't have happened. On the surface, it sounded like this could have happened a year ago, but the fact is that if I can elaborate, I'm pleased that we got 20 all living hostages out, which we didn't think we could do even now. And there's this unknown about the dead ones, and I don't tend to focus on that since it's not as important to me, but it obviously is to the families. But the things that came together, I could elaborate with some of the more recent things if you wanted me to, but I could just stop by saying I'm pleased.
So what happened after World War II was the Marshall Plan, and the United States basically had forces. I guess the Allies had forces in Germany and other places, which policed and supervised the land and gradually withdrew. Same thing in Japan. Um, what we don't know is the mechanism for rebuilding Gaza. I mean, I saw some images on TV today of bulldozers clearing the streets of Gaza. Um, and so, they say they're going to send money. They're not going to, drop it from airplanes. They're going to give it to someone. Now, the question is, who is that? And my hope is that there will be an international force. It can't just be Israel, and it can't be the United States. But the thing that I find hopeful, and I'll call on Henry in a moment, is that we have the major Muslim forces in the Middle East lining up in favor and in support of this plan. And so I think, and we can talk about the reasons why that happened, because and that's important. I know Alan wants to comment on it, and so do I. But I do think that's a sign that we can be hopeful about. Henry, and then Jerry.
Yeah, I'm with you, Rabbi. I'm cautiously optimistic because it's Hamas, so there's always that, there's always going to be that tension because of the background and the attitude. So, but the fact that there's 20 hostages, living hostages that are back is big. So a lot of the chips that Hamas had, they gave up, with the live
I'm actually
hostages.
astonished by that.
So
because Hamas
I
basically has given up their entire leverage by releasing all the hostages. But I hear you sort of saying the same thing.
Exactly. Yep. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Okay, Jerry.
Yeah, the news reports suggested that all the Arab nations were pushing Hamas to do so. And my thought is, we've got such great wealth in the Arab nations. They could rebuild it. They have all that oil.
Yes,
They've
there's
got,
Mhm.
yeah, there's so much wealth in all the Arab nations that they can certainly single-handedly pull it together.
Okay, Alan.
I was going to add how the things I felt unfolded from timing, because I learned one thing a couple of days ago that surprised me. And so I think one of the things that happened, if I describe it not necessarily in the right order, is that Israel substantially weakened Hamas, but Hamas is very stubborn and they're not inclined to concede, even though they didn't realize they could win. They just kept plugging along, doing their evil stuff. The Arab countries in the neighborhood they haven't been very warm to the Palestinians. And so the fact they have a lot of wealth has never been helpful to the Palestinians because some reason the Palestinians have been looked as black sheep, so to speak. One of the things and now Mr. Trump did see the opportunity to increase the range of the Abraham Accords, but the Arabs were not exactly ready to move forward with Trump's ideas, except that here's what happened. The way I heard is a bad thing became a good thing. After Israel attacked Qatar, which in my opinion at the time was questionable decision for timing during the hostage restoration, it turned out to be something that I'm going to interpret as good because the other Arab countries realized Israel has no reservation to go any place, anytime to do anything. And since they publicly said, Israel, we're going after anybody involved in October 7th, the Hamas people, anybody like that. Well, that got the attention of the Arab countries, and they said, or at least the way interpreted by the journalists in the Times of Israel, they became receptive to Trump's idea that if you play ball with us, we will actually work with you to normalize with the Abraham Accords, and that will stop Israel from having this free reign, combined with the fact that um, the other part of that was the annexation. So annexation of the West Bank kind of was a problem at the time of the Abraham Accords, and it became another problem right in this parallel because the right wing government was moving very quickly toward that in a way that would have not only made the current Abraham Accords not expand, it could have destroyed it, because the West Bank annexation has always been an agenda of the Abraham Accords, but the right wing politicians don't really particularly care about that. So all of this came together.
We need to define our terms, and I think
I'm sorry.
it's a little unclear. So Israel occupies the West Bank, and there is limited self-rule in the West Bank, but the people who are citizens living in the West Bank are not citizens of Israel. Annexation means you make this land part of Israel proper. So, for example, all of Jerusalem has been annexed, and there are areas around Jerusalem that were part of the West Bank and technically part of Jordan, who now is absolutely part of Israel, and people who live there are Israeli citizens. And also the Golan Heights is now actually part of Israel. It's been annexed. So there is pressure in the right wing in Israel to begin to annex the West Bank. Right now, there are settlements in the West Bank, which are very controversial and illegal under international law. But in these settlements, there are only Jews living. They're not Muslims living, and the Muslims that live in the area are not citizens of Israel. So the issue then, I think what you're saying is, but I'm not sure, Alan, that these accords will make it tougher for Israel to annex the West Bank. And if Israel annexed the West Bank, that would destroy the Abraham Accords.
That's right. But let me clarify my understanding. Is annexation under the right wing, if I can call it, the government's policy, annexation doesn't make resident citizens. And for the example, it should technically, in my opinion, under international law, to my knowledge. But if you take East Jerusalem as an example, East Jerusalem have to apply and become citizens by choice. Otherwise, they can't vote in national elections. They have their own government in East Jerusalem, but it's local, municipal. Mm-hmm. So that part is, I'm sure, not in the minds of the Ben Gvir and Smotrich.
Right,
they don't want to annex and give all the Palestinians in the West Bank Israeli citizenship and so forth. So it's complicated.
And of course, what happened in Gaza in 2000, from 67 to 2005, Gaza was very much like the West Bank. Namely, it was Egypt, just like the West Bank was Jordan. And then as a result of the 67 war, Israel occupied Gaza, occupied the West Bank, and by the way, occupied all of the Sinai Peninsula. In the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, Israel gave up the Sinai Peninsula, but Egypt did not want back Gaza, and Jordan did not want back the West Bank. So Israel occupies it, and it's not considered, I don't think it's considered in Israel to be a permanent status. It's a problem that needs to be dealt with. And so that's going to be now, I would say, so what happened in 2005 is Israel relinquished its occupation of Gaza and just left. And of course, the Gazans, built hundreds of miles of tunnels and basically kept arming and well, we know what happened in Gaza. So that certainly is going to be an issue now, even presuming that things go well in Gaza. The issue of what to do with the West Bank is a huge political issue. And one of the ways I think Netanyahu keeps the favor of the right wing is by continuing to allow settlements in the West Bank. Some of those settlements in the West Bank, you walk to them from Jerusalem, and they're big apartment buildings, and they I don't know if they're technically annexed. I actually don't know. They're behind what's called the Green Line, which is what the borders were in '67. Um, um, and others are really outposts. They're, a little community on a hill somewhere with lots of barbed wire and lots of armed Jews defending them. Erwin.
First of all, the West Bank right now, because Abbas is so corrupt and so weak, Hamas is controlling most of the
I don't think that's true at all. I don't think
West Bank.
I don't think Hamas has any role in the West Bank.
Oh,
Except for
lot of Hamas is in the West Bank. That's a number. What I am concerned of after World War II, not only they defeated the Nazis, but the ideology was completely defeated and was not allowed to practice in any of the Eastern European countries and in Germany. Right now, ideology is flourishing in Gaza. So Hamas
and
has
also in Germany, you're not allowed to have swastikas, and you're not allowed to be Nazis, but you can embrace the same ideas. It's illegal according to the laws of Germany to use that specific language and those specific symbols.
Yeah, but in Gaza, you're allowed to say and do that you want to kill Jews and you hate Jews,
And that's
so,
also true in California.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a
No, I mean
major
it is true.
major distinction.
In Germany, they don't have what we would say is freedom of speech. I think in Great Britain also, but
But
in this country,
the big problem is Hamas is I think not surrendered and has the arms and all the
well,
things.
let's remember we're only a day into this.
Oh
So
well,
so
and
let me comment, Erwin. There's a lot of people living in the West Bank. I would say the majority, probably the vast majority of Muslims living in the West Bank and Gaza hate Israel and would like to see Israel destroyed, and probably would like to see no Jews survive. Whether they technically wave a Gazan flag or they wave a different flag, one for Hezbollah, or PLO or whatever, um, one of the things that I find odd about this discussion is the Gazans could surrender, but I'm not the Gazans. The Hamas as an organization could disappear, but if they change their name and keep doing the same thing, we can say, okay, well, there's no more Hamas, but there's still a lot of Gazans that hate Israel. And then the question is, are they a threat to Israel or not? And how do we tolerate that going forward?
you see, Rabbi, I look at it in a different way. The perpetrators or the masterminds of October 7 is still live in Qatar in beautiful homes, and they stole millions of dollars. And just last week, a guy was interviewed on CNN, and he came right out that the ideology exists and Hamas never gonna surrender. He
And
said
many
it.
of the Nazis were living in peace and comfort in Argentina and Brazil and died happily in those areas. And so the issue. So let me add some of my own comments if I may, because some of you have spoken several times. I think we're not instantly going to remove hatred of Israel and hatred of Jews from Gaza and the West Bank. One would hope that there would be a strong feeling among the Gazans that following Hamas has been a disaster and there's got to be a better way. Because I would guess most Gazans, most Palestinians want to basically grow up with their families and live in peace. Alan spent a lot of time in Israel. I lived in Israel for a year. I lived in Israel during a time when, shopping in East Jerusalem and visiting West Bank cities was easy. And I would be shopping, and I don't know what they thought of me as a person, but basically, they wanted to run a business. They had pictures of their kids. They wanted their kids to be educated, and they wanted orthodonture. They wanted to live in peace. I would say most people want to live in peace. Now the question is, you have people who say the problem is Israel, and we have to destroy Israel. I would say, in terms of the geopolitics, as I understand it, and I often boast of my zero success record in understanding politics. But one of the things that's clearly happened is in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Iran, these nations, and a little bit in Qatar, as Alan was saying, these nations have learned that Israel is going to come for you and is going to be ruthless beyond, I would say, what most people can tolerate. I have big problems with the way Israel conducted the war in Gaza. But no one can deny that the lessons learned by the Gazans is, if we follow Hamas to have a cross-border attack and kill a few hundred Jews or a few thousand Jews and take a few more hostages, that will not end well for us. If they've learned anything, they have learned that. At the same time, Israel has virtually destroyed Hezbollah, or greatly weakened Hezbollah, greatly weakened. I mean, the Syrian government is no longer there. The Iran inflicted the greatest attack it has ever inflicted on the nation of Israel, and Israel responded with great force and great success. I mean, I've heard that basically they wiped out Iran's ability to have to protect itself from aircraft. And then you have the Houthi rebels, and I've never quite, understood that whole world. But basically, what you have are all of these agents of Iran who are Sunni Muslim, who are Shiite Muslims, and they basically have inflamed their people by saying, we're really doing this to liberate the Palestinians in Israel. And by and large, Israel has inflicted massive losses on those countries. I mean, Hezbollah in Lebanon had far more rockets, like 10 times or more a number of rockets than the Gazans had in terms of their ability to inflict damage on Israel. And Israel has been largely successful in every one of these countries in basically teaching those countries the lesson: if you come after Israel, you are going to severely regret it. And while I have problems with the way Israel conducted the war, I have no doubt that that's the lesson that these nations have learned. And in addition, the other thing that makes me hopeful is you now have the Sunni Muslim Axis, which is Axis, AXIS, which is Saudi Arabia, which is Qatar, which is the Emirates. Basically, you have a lot of Muslim countries, even Singapore, and there are a lot of Muslim countries that are not Arab. And basically, I think they view Iran as a greater threat than Israel. And I think, and I hope the whole idea of the Abraham Accords is that these nations are actually having peace and diplomatic relations with the state of Israel. And you have embassies and you have flights going from these countries. And, Israelis can visit without having a kind of a fake passport that they use that doesn't show. Or we can visit these nations, even though we have Israeli stamps on our passport, where for many years, if you had an Israel stamp on your passport, none of these nations would allow you to visit. So I think Israel has, at a great price, changed the power dynamic in the Middle East. And I think the issue then, I heard I think it was an ambassador from Israel, former ambassador from Israel to the United States, speaking tonight, saying Hamas is not a threat to Israel any longer. Hamas's infrastructure, Hamas's capabilities it's a threat to Palestinians, because what they're doing is they're going after Palestinians whom they believe were cooperating with Israel. So they're murdering other Palestinians, but there is no question that Israel is going to be much more aggressive on that border than they were in the past. So, the understanding is Hamas's ability to attack and hurt Israel in any significant way is gone. And now the question is, if there's an international force that will, in effect, occupy Gaza and insist that Gazans form a government that's focused on improving the life of Gaza rather than attacking and eliminating Israel, that could be essentially what happened after World War II, sort of the equivalent of the Marshall Plan. I mean, I think that's the hope. I think there's going to be lots of hiccups along the way. I think my guess is that it's not going to be so easy to return all these bodies to Israel, and that's a condition. And then the question is disarming Gazans. If you have a guy who's got a gun and he's disarming, Hamas. If you have a guy who has a gun and he has a Hamas flag, does that mean we failed to disarm Hamas? There's going to need to be a police force in Gaza. So who controls the police force? And so the hope is that this group of nations will get together and be a force basically to guarantee the security of Gaza and also to guarantee the security of Israel. And I'm cautiously optimistic that could work. Alan.
So I wanted to kind of lead into this opportunity that I believe is built into the 20-point plan, which is a two-state solution of coexisting between borders that Palestinians and Israel. And the piece that I just wanted to add to something Erwin said is first agreeing that the Palestinian Authority is a missed opportunity because they are so corrupt and haven't done as much as the Oslo Accords expected. But I would defend
Abbas is in the 25th year of his 4-year term.
That's right. But where I was going with this was the areas A, B, and C, which not everybody maybe understands, and I won't try to do justice to it. But there's three parts of the West Bank were defined in 1995 by, if that's the right year, by the Oslo Accords. And the first one is important. It was called Area A, and the Palestinian Authority took control of it and set up its own police force. And the good news, to my knowledge, is that the way they've done that, and it's not the biggest geographical piece, but it's demonstrated that border terrorism across into Israel has been controlled better by the Palestinian Authority police than the IDF were able to do before, because they don't know all the back alleys in the Palestinian villages. So Area A is a good example that when I give credit to the PA, still arguing with Erwin that Abbas and much of this corruption makes the whole thing shaky. But Area A is good. Area B is probably okay also. It's the shared use of the property where Israel can go into the area and the Palestinians have some. The Area C is a frustration to me because it's the biggest geography and the IDF controls it, and they control it in a militarily occupation. That personally, I'm now editorializing, but I think that is one of the challenges to move from the military occupation of the Area C toward something which we might consider self-determination that would lead to a two-state solution. Does that make sense to anybody?
Oh, I remember when on my last trip to Israel with a group, we went to Bethlehem, which is in the West Bank, and our tour guide could not come with us. Israelis are not allowed into Bethlehem unless they have special permission. I think our driver had this permission, so he was allowed to drive us there. But basically, he took us to a place where we were met with a Palestinian tour guide who then, showed us around Bethlehem and other places. Interestingly, a Palestinian Christian.
What year did that start? Because I got to see Bethlehem with
No,
our,
we all got to see Bethlehem.
but
We're
with our
not
tour guide.
Israelis.
No,
We're,
but with
yeah, no, it's progressed over the years. Yeah, I've been to Bethlehem also with Israelis, so I don't know when that started.
okay.
I just don't know. But those kinds of things can happen. So the question is, I mean, if these nations that got together today, and there's a lot of them, would say, we will help you rebuild Gaza and even the West Bank. And but our conditions of doing that is we need to have a government that is trustworthy. We don't want to just send money to Swiss banks. I mean, Arafat's wife is living. I don't know if she's still alive, but a lot of his money wound up in France, and she had wonderful apartments along the Champs-Élysées. So, I mean, there's a lot of corruption in the world, and nobody wants to just give money to corrupt politicians. So the hope is that there can be some sort of mainly Arab and Muslim organizations that realize that it's in everybody's interest to solve the Palestinian issue in Israel. And my own view is that the only way to solve it is to have a Palestinian state. And I know, that's anathema. So there are a couple of things in this deal which were absolutely anathema and impossibilities to Hamas and impossibilities to Israel. And one of the things that was impossible to Hamas is surrender and disarm. And one of the things that was an impossibility for Israel is to allow a Palestinian state. So there's a couple of nuances, and I haven't studied the language of the 22 points, but one of them went with something like Hamas would relinquish its power to an appropriately chosen, political entity managing things. And because it's out of bounds in Israel to recognize the Palestinian Authority, there was language that they could deal with the Palestinian Authority once it had resolved issues of corruption and so on. So they're vaguely worded assurances, but that's international diplomacy. It's hard just to be simple and straightforward in international diplomacy. So you give everybody a little bit of what they want, and then hopefully work things out. But there's a lot of booby traps on the way. I would imagine that somewhere the Hamas is still going to send rockets into Israel, or heights, with fire bombs attached to them. And so then the question is, does Israel respond by reigniting the Gaza war, or do they do what Israel's been doing for the last 10 or 15 years, namely have very limited strikes, but continue to allow, food and water and rebuilding to go on in Gaza? Henry, I'm sorry, Erwin.
Well,
Yeah,
today,
I just want to mention that today President Trump was praising the prime minister or colonel or whatever his rank is, Mr. The president of
Netanyahu?
Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
No, president of
President of Egypt.
Egypt.
Yes.
And he is basically Egypt's was very very able to help Hamas getting armament through the Rafah crossing all these years, and he is very much of afraid of Hamas because is the Egyptian Brotherhood is part of Hamas, and he can
hold
fall
on. The
any
Egyptian
minute.
Brotherhood is not part of Hamas. Egyptian Brotherhood is the Egyptian Brotherhood. It's not part
Yeah,
of.
but
I mean,
is
there are people in all of these nations who have as their major goal the destruction of Israel and are anti-Semitic. That's true. Now the question is this an opportunity to basically for nations to fight that tendency and and make it clear that the way you help Palestinians is not by destroying Israel, because we tried that. It doesn't work. If Hamas tried to destroy Israel, well, how did that work out for the Palestinians? I mean, you have 60,000 Palestinians dead. You have 80% of Gaza in rubble. So it doesn't work. So the question is, can these nations can the leaders of the nations appease their populations by saying the best way we help the Palestinians is to rebuild Gaza and rebuild the West Bank as a Palestinian state? And I would say everybody's praising everybody else in the hopes that that praise will lead to that result. Henry.
I think maybe Irwin was referring not to the Egyptian Brotherhood, but to the Islamic Brotherhood.
No, but there's the Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt, which is a, is an
Right. Yeah, it's
Islamicist,
huge.
violent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
the
anyway,
Egyptian government is fragile.
oh, absolutely. And the PA, the big thing about the PA is the pay for slay.
I can't quite
Where they would,
understand what you're saying.
pay for slay. I don't know if you heard
Pay
that
for
term
what?
before.
I can't.
Slay. To kill. SLAY.
Yes.
Anyway, it's the.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alan. You
A
were
way
going
of
to say
rewarding
something?
people who commit
they will
suicide.
Who kill Jews? Yes, kill
up
Israelis.
till
Yes.
now, terrorists their families were compensated
Right.
by the Palestinian Authority and probably other things, but the PA
Right.
had this policy that if a terrorist killing Israelis died, they pretty much got a annuity for their family. And we passed a law, the Taylor Law, we the U.S. forbidding that, and that didn't probably get enforced very well. But recently, is part of Abbas and the PA trying to get in good standings ahead of the 20 point. They actually said, and is now being monitored, they won't do that anymore. They will not
And what
reward.
Israel did, as sort of the flip side of that coin is, if a terrorist killed himself in a bus bombing, Israel would go in and demolish that person's house and that family's house and leave his family homeless, even though the family. So it's sort of the flip side of the same idea.
Well, it's intended to be a deterrent as opposed to a reward. I see them as different, but what you said is true, that Israel will destroy the families. It's a punishment rather than a reward, but it's the same
Of
thing.
course. So the issue is, you have a person whose life is pretty miserable, doesn't have a job, is barely surviving, and says, one way I can do this is I can take a bomb on a bus or in a cafe or something and kill lots of Jews and Israelis. And I know that the government of the Palestinian Authority, Egypt, or whoever, will take care of my family.
And I'm going to get.
Or I know that the government of Israel is going to destroy my family's house. It's either an incentive or a disincentive for terrorism.
And it's and for the eyes of the suicide bomber, if I can call it, is that they've been conditioned to think that in the afterlife they're going to have a really nice life with 72 whatever
Yeah, so a reward, yes, a reward in heaven. And I would say, that that's not unique to Islam. Other religions, including aspects of Judaism, talk about suffering in this world to have your reward in the next world.
but not suicide. I'm pretty sure it's not the same
Not
idea.
well, yeah, but how about the guy that assassinated Rabin? How about the guy that murdered all these people at prayer in the in the cave of Machpelah?
I don't know where the guy who killed Rabin ended in the status of the rabbinate, but it shouldn't
No,
have. If there's,
but the inspiration for that has been Pinchas. In the Torah, Pinchas, who is a priest, murders two Jews who are sinning without benefit of judicial review or whatever. So I wouldn't say it's only Islam that embraces this. By the way, one of the Muslim countries with which I am very familiar is Morocco, who has a very strong king. And we were in Morocco some years ago, not long after a national election, when the king allowed a parliament to be elected. And the parliament came close to having an Islamicist majority, namely a majority of murderous Muslims as a political entity. So the king dissolved the parliament, and end of problem, because the king rules Morocco with an iron fist, and you can't go up against the king. He allows city councils, but there's no parliament in Morocco. And other Muslim countries, have all kinds of political issues. Look at Syria, had a dictator, the Assad family, for so many years, and they finally got rid of that, and who knows where that's going. So the Middle East is in turmoil, and what I would say, what makes me somewhat hopeful, is I think it's in the interest of some of the most powerful countries in the Middle East to actually see a peaceful Middle East, and which I think will include a Palestinian state. And and who knows what's going to happen in Israel, because Netanyahu has his own problems, and whether his government will survive all of this. There's some speculation. I think, Alan, you follow Israeli politics more closely than I do, but I remember seeing some speculation that he might get some centrist politicians to help keep his government around if he loses the ultra right wing. So who knows? I mean, the politics is crazy.
I was very surprised today when President Trump meddled in Israeli politics, and when he made the speech, he said to I don't know to who, he says, "Please pardon your prime minister."
Right.
I mean, was.
I have tried I've learned not to use the words surprise and Trump in the same sentence.
Okay.
When pardoning illegal people who are convicted get pardoned all the time. So what big deal to pardon somebody who's just been indicted? Pardon them. It's Trump. It's Trump.
And by the way, my understanding is that it's the president of Israel that has the ability to pardon. I didn't know.
Yes, and he worded it. I was listening to Trump's speech. He directed and he made the distinctions when he wanted to talk to Herzog. He said president. Mostly he was talking to the prime minister and Netanyahu. But your point, Rabbi, is exactly that. It's the president of the subject, right? Is this slim to no chance that Herzog is going to pardon him? Of course.
Who knows? I mean, Ford pardoned Nixon, and basically for political peace in the United States after Watergate, because trials of Nixon would have absolutely torn apart the United States.
Right.
So Ford decided that we're better off pardoning him. And I could certainly see that happening in Israel, just to take that off the table. I mean, again, I don't value my political judgment, but that doesn't seem to me to be beyond the.
If you take it just in the draw the small box you just drew, absolutely reasonable, but make the box a little bigger, all of a sudden it gets very messy. Of course.
Messy and Middle East politics are synonyms.
Oh, yeah, they are absolutely.
So, I certainly expect there to be lots of ups and downs, and I don't think Hamas is going to go meekly into the night. And I think there will be issues, and the issue, and I don't, Israeli politics is crazy also, and can Netanyahu's government stand? And what will happen when aspects of this plan are violated? Will Israel begin an all-out war again and start bombing the living daylights? You have all these Gazans that have returned to
Rubble.
rubble, but their homes. And so are they going to then start rebuilding it, only to have, Israeli jets come and bomb them into rubble again? I don't know. But I do think that a result of this, and I think what has woken up the nations of the Middle East, is that Israel is not going to go meekly into the night either. So Israel will do whatever it takes to survive. And this is a survival issue for Israel. It isn't just a political issue. And with Gaza, with the war in Gaza largely done, that frees up a huge ability for Israel to take out other threats like the Houthi rebels or Iran, if they start acting up. So I mean, it's
Oh yeah.
it's a wild time. Yeah.
So all of the ways in which I have observed for the last year or so is how Israel has helped to weaken Hezbollah and Hamas and Syria, but the Houthis had held on to the last minute. But what I like about, to the degree it gets implemented, is the Houthis are now quiet, because they took the position that they would be quiet and stop shooting rockets at Israel if there is a ceasefire or the war stops, or whatever terms you want to use. So the message from the Houthis in the last 48 hours is, we're quiet. And it became quiet. I mean, the rockets we get, and I've been part of the sirens with the Houthis more than as many as the Iranians, I think, when I was there. But the point is, the Houthis are putting their mouth where their message was, we're going to keep bugging Israel from 3,000 miles away or 900 miles away, because you guys have this war against the Gaza, and now that's over, and now that's quiet. Now all of this ends up being fragile. But the good news is all the players are on board for the time being, in my opinion.
Yeah. So we will watch and hope and pray.
But now Hamas brought some soldier in the Gaza and said that we want our own country, we want our own government, and we want our own this and that.
And I think they should. I think that Gaza should have its own government, and I think and I hope that the government will be put in place by an Arab coalition that makes it clear that the purpose of the government is not to destroy Israel. Hamas has as its stated objective the destruction of Israel. So you want to have a government in Gaza that is not premised on the destruction of Israel.
But they want Hamas don't be in the new government.
I can't quite understand what you just said.
I said the other country, Israel, they want that Hamas has any effect on the new government in Palestine. don't have any.
Yeah, so it'll have to be ironed out. But as I was saying earlier, and I know you came in a little late, if you have a bunch of people who are part of Hamas, and then tomorrow they adopt a new name and a new flag, they're still the same people that hate Israel. So the question is, will you have a government in a Palestinian state whose main objective is not the destruction of Israel, but improving life for their citizens? And it's been pretty clear that the destruction of Israel and a war against Israel does not improve the life of your citizens. I mean, that's a lesson I think, Gazans can't ignore. Erwin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, my last remark is that right now two large clan in Gaza is fighting Hamas, and I think if the Gazans feel that they're better off not supporting Hamas, they should support these two clans and help them to get rid of internally Hamas.
Yeah, I mean that's
But they
apparently
are not doing it.
apparently Hamas is now fighting against internal Gazan enemies.
Yes.
And we'll see how that works. Alan.
Have you or any of you all heard any reference to the United Nations as part of this 20-point or the follow through? I was just realizing that we have different opinions on how weak the UN and its effectiveness. Nevertheless, it does exist and it has done some useful things over the years. Has anybody mentioned or included?
I haven't heard
UN?
any mention of the United Nations role.
No, they're not involved
in this.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
an untapped resource.
So, I would say we're all praying for the same outcome. I'll mention one interest. We began before we started recording with some grammatical issues and how you pronounce Hebrew. I want to call your attention to if you listen to Israelis, they never say Gaza, they say Aza, because the first letter in Gaza is not a gimel, but an ayin. And there's actually some speculation that at one time ayin had a dagesh. An ayin is a guttural letter, it can never take a dagesh. So there's speculation that an obsolete pronunciation of the ayin with a dagesh is a G, as in Gaza. But in Israel they would say Aza. They never say Gaza, and I don't know where the pronunciation with the G came from.
Yeah, Rabbi, I would like to ask you about the Midrash. Why is Bereshit starts? Why is the first Torah portion starts it with the Bet, not with the Aleph?
So there's a lot of midrash on that.
Yeah.
And there's two kinds of midrashes. One is the shape of the letter Bet points to the rest of the Torah. It points to the left. And so the teaching is that all wisdom is in that direction, to the left. You can't go up, you can't go right, you can't go down. So you can't ask what happens above, before, or below the Torah. That's one midrash. Another midrash is it begins with the letter Bet because the letter Bet is the second letter. It's the number 2. And it's to teach that there are two Torahs. There is the written Torah and the oral Torah.
I see.
A third collection of midrash, which is even more interesting, is a discussion of all the letters arguing before God that we should have the honor of being the first letter. So, for example, the Aleph says, I'm the first letter of the alphabet. Shouldn't I have it? And God says, yeah, but the word for sin, Aveirah, begins with an Aleph. And there's a whole other bunch of words in Hebrew that begin with an Aleph. And they actually go down the list of maybe all the letters. And why? Because Bet begins, is not, not only the reasons I indicated, but it also is the first letter of birth, of a blessing. So God decides that Bet should get the honor of the first letter. that's the array of midrashim. on
Thank
that.
you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for asking me a question that I can answer, as opposed to everything relating to international politics. I really appreciate it.
Since we're on the subject of Israel, I'm leaving for Israel on Sunday morning. I'll
Oh,
be
wow.
gone for 3 weeks. So best I can tell from the time zones, this time slot on Monday and Wednesday isn't going to work for me. So I'll see you guys in the middle of November.
Okay, well, Nesiya Tova, and send us an email every now and again,
Really.
or even record. You
Let
know
us
what?
know what's
If you record a little 5-minute review of what's going on, and you probably can figure out a way to send that to me, and we can review that in one of our sessions.
Okay, I did in the last trip, as you know, and Jerry at least, I did send these periodic little reports during the 7 weeks. This is organized differently.
You can probably record. You're the computer whiz. You can probably record a 5-minute or a 10-minute update. You can probably even get it on YouTube, and we can
Especially
play
if there's something that's a video around me that makes it interesting.
Well,
I don't necessarily
Hostage Square, didn't they rename that Hostage Square? The
I don't know
square
if it's
in
officially
Tel
called
Aviv.
Hostage Square, but there is a place. I mean, Alan would know, in Tel Aviv.
Well, it's the plaza outside of the Tel Aviv
Yeah, but I think they renamed it today.
Oh, that I
to
haven't heard.
permanently being Hostage Square. They might. I didn't see that, but that
I know
doesn't.
I saw an item on the news just before we started that they're keeping that counting clock going until all of the deceased hostages are also returned.
Right, but you and Jerry are the two that I copied on my little write-up on the hostages, where I said I set aside my masking tape and marker, and I'm not adding 7:38 today, and I took off my dog tag, and my gesture is
And
in spite of
there was one guy on TV, maybe it was one of the ambassadors, that made a point, an Israeli, saying he is still wearing the yellow ribbon.
Yeah, no, and the Times of Israel is dealing with that too. So we all are trying to be as positive but there's some things that are very incomplete at this point, but some really good things are also. So anyway, I'll
Okay,
thank you
well,
for
happy Simchat Torah.
Yeah, happy Simchat Torah.
See you next time. We'll discuss Rachel and Akiba next Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.